So welcome to this week's podcast. My name is Keri-Anne Livingstone, and I have invited my very dear friend and amazing coach, helper, healer, Michelle McIntosh, to talk about emotions. And I think there's a lot of things that we're going to talk about today. Why do I want to talk to Michelle about this? We are kindred spirits. In fact, the very moment we met was like a just cluster F of like two highly sensitive empaths not wanting to rock the boats or upset anybody, or total people pleasers, where we're like, is that okay? Was that okay? Are we okay? Like this evening at the Roxbury, kind of like, are we cool? Are you cool? Clusterfuck. And it's funny to think back. That's over 10 years now. And oh, how we've grown.
Totally.
And I find it very interesting. So the thing is, we've been talking about this for a very long time. For probably about 6 to 8 weeks, we've been ruminating, ironically, about being a highly sensitive person, labels like empath, RSD, which is
Rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll get more into that. And all of these things that are coming to light around being an open, emotional, fully embodied human being. And so I also find it very ironic that we are meeting after like probably the most emotional December I've ever had. In the last 6 weeks, I've had 3 of the most emotionally charged experience, the most emotional breakdowns I've ever had. And so, and actually maybe even before that, with you in a very RSD moment. So I don't know if we're going to touch on all of it, but we're going to talk about the experience of emotions and what they are and what they aren't, and what we've learned about them in order to offer ourselves, each other, because I'm here to learn from her and she's here to learn from me, and we're here to learn from each other about how, in a way, talking about how does someone that feels so sensitive feel stronger, and is it even fair to say stronger? So or more resilient, or more resolved, or fill in the blank. So we're going to talk a little bit about the hows from my perspective, from her perspective. And I'm going to hand it over to Michelle so she can introduce herself properly, because a few things have changed since the last time we talked about what you're doing in the world.
So much has changed. So I'm Michelle McIntosh. I am an ADHD life coach now. I have ADHD, which is, I think, new since the last time we talked to.
Official.
And yeah, official, and RSD as well, which isn't an official diagnosis, and we can touch on that later, but definitely RSD. But emotions, I scored very high on the emotional dysregulation piece in my ADHD diagnosis. So emotions have been a part of my life for a very, very long time, since I can remember. And so as I became a life coach, I needed to think about who I wanted to work with. And I passionately wanted to work with people who struggled with emotional dysregulation, because this is something so close to my heart. For the longest time, I felt broken. Something was wrong with me. I would have extremely high highs, very low lows, and everything in between. And my poor husband just had to deal with so much. I would apologize profusely to him. I'm sorry you married someone who's broken. But on the other side of that now, I know why. I understand it better. I have a much better understanding and much more compassion for where I'm at and for those intense emotions. So that's where I am and who I am now. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Me too. And I was like putting my hand up for a lot of what you were saying. That emotional dysregulation, or being the emotional one. What has your experience, like, what's your journey? What did that, I know that when was it Gay Hendricks that wrote the book? He wrote a book. Oh my God, so terrible. What is that book? And he talked about 4 elements of like, is this you? Is this you? Or is this you? Like, what
Mhm.
category are you in? And I'm gonna have to please,
I
what
can't
was
think of it. I'm trying to think of it.
the big leap?
Yes. Yes, that's the one with the fish hopping out of
The
the.
big leap.
Yes, yes.
And he talked about like why you can't do it, like why you gonna let resistance get in the way, sort of thing. And he went through the first 3, which of course I can't remember now. And I was like, no, that's not me. And I was really like, hey, I think I might be like clear here. Like but whatever. But you're like, that's not me. That's not me. And
Yeah.
then he gets to the 4th and he's like, fundamentally broken. And I was like, or you have a sense of feeling fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. Just the worst one out of all of them. And I never knew that that was a thing, and I
Yeah.
was like, that is something that has always been an underlying, just that underlying, like almost like swamp water underneath my
Mm.
existence that flares up whenever things get hard or I haven't had enough sleep.
Yeah.
um but how strong that feeling is, and like the source of that almost feels like volcanic, like, and it erupts and it's just all over us. So tell me about your experience with your journey with your emotions.
Uh Gosh, I can't remember a time when I didn't feel emotions intensely, and I never felt safe to express them ever. I literally thought something was being really wrong with me. And I just internalized that because I would have really, um, I'm going to say inappropriate reactions or intense reactions to some seemingly really small things. I remember feeling like I couldn't stand to be in my own skin, and I didn't know how to express it because I didn't feel safe, because I felt broken, because I felt like you're just too much. Oh, would you just calm down? You're so sensitive. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard all of those things. Would you just calm down? Or do you need some help? Like things like that. Really traumatizing. I hate to use the word trauma,
Mhm.
but traumatizing things that you internalize. And so I walked through the world going, okay, so it's not safe to feel. It's not safe to have these emotions. It's not like, it's just not safe. So I'm just going to try and bottle them up. And so I walked through my life that way. And I married somebody who also, I love him to bits, but emotions are not comfortable for him either. And so it's like I'm living in this world of, where can I express these like I have them, I can't make them go away.
Mhm.
I see emotions as like waves in an ocean. Try and stand in the ocean and stop a wave. Like, it's
Oh,
not.
we give it our best shot.
We really try, and
We
people
really
do,
do.
right? And
Mhm.
it's like pushing a beach ball under the water. How does that
Mhm.
working for you? What happens when you let go, right?
Mhm.
Bursts. And so that's
Oh,
sort of my experience of it. It's just,
I
yeah, yeah.
I just got this total image of like peeing your pants or worse,
Mhm.
you know, it just, and in the visual, I'm a kid, where it's happening, you just like you can't stop it, and then it's like the bridesmaid scene. It's happening, and
It's
you're just,
happening. It's
it's
happening.
happening, it's
Yeah,
happening, blah
yeah,
blah
totally.
blah. And the humiliation, that's the piece. Like,
Oh,
that's it, really. I mean, there's something so. I mean, this is the epicenter of it. So we had an incident, like, so I'm, in terms of Michelle's learning, in terms of your learning,
mhm.
I've very much been a little hanger on. Like, being over this, so like, what are you learning this week about like the ADHD? And, like, because I'm undiagnosed. But there's strong indicators that I might be on the spectrum of the ADHD. And she laughs because she's like, oh, you totally are.
I,
Or when we're with you, you're like, you want to know how I know you have ADHD? Because you just did that.
Did
And
you
I'm
know
like,
that that's a common ADHD thing, or just letting you know? Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
feel, I do feel, I feel better like when you help me identify those moments, or at least give them a home, other than I'm inept or just fundamentally flawed
Yeah. Yeah.
into falling into what's wrong with me. I think that would surprise people maybe that you know, I'm a clarity coach, and I know a process, and I've been taught a process. I embody a process about getting clarity through very emotional experiences and navigating emotions and understanding emotions. And I've always been able to articulate emotions. And so here's the interesting thing is that I grew up, I think I felt fairly like permissive, like I had a lot of permission to feel my emotions. I don't remember ever being shamed about them.
Mm.
Um, and yet we still share a lot of these same things. So part of me is like, well, maybe it doesn't even matter if you had like the early childhood stuff. I mean, then trauma is trauma. And when you talk about not being able to feel your feelings and having that, here they come, it's like re-traumatizing to then feel your feelings. So not only do you have the feelings, and that is traumatic, to actually share them with people opens up a level of humiliation that I don't know. I just never heard anybody talk about like dissecting that
And
experience.
I want to say shame, like the shame of this is wrong. And I also don't even want to say it's just how I grew up with my family of origin, but I would say on a societal basis, women who are overly emotional or overly, it's kind of frowned upon. It's not, oh, she's just overreacting, like calm down, right? Like, I don't know. How many times have you been asked to calm down?
Oh, I
So I
hated
think
that as a kid. That
I
was
know,
no,
right?
that to me was the worst. You couldn't say anything worse to me than calm down as a kid. Humiliated,
Yeah.
absolutely humiliated,
Yeah. Yeah.
embarrassed, exposed,
Yeah. So
because
you're,
one of these things is not like the other.
yeah.
Everyone else seems to be okay, but even excitement, even joy, that's what kills me. Is that even in the most beautifully expansive expression, it's too much.
It's too
And so
much.
you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
And so you're so right in that it's the emotion itself, whatever that is. And it could be joy, it could be, and but also the shame of, oh right, I'm not supposed to feel it this deeply. I'm not supposed to feel this intense. I'm not supposed to. So then you've
Yeah.
got that shame on top of it. And so there you're sitting like this, you know, you're just sitting there going, crap. Well, okay, I'll just shove the beach ball underneath the water. I'll just keep trying. I'll keep trying. And
Oh my
until,
God.
right? Like,
I'll keep trying. I'll keep trying to just keep it together. And like this is like right here, sir. But like it's just that I'll keep trying to swim and not let myself drown and be exposed for being a total wreck. That there's
yeah,
immediate judgment about emoting,
yeah,
and that
yeah.
it's like the last ditch effort to try and save ourselves, like we're gonna die. And when you talk about the beach ball, it's all flooding back to me like what happened about 6 weeks ago with you and me.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
Um, and maybe we'll talk about it. Of course, we're going to talk about it. What are we doing here? Um,
We are talking about emotions, right?
well, Karen, we are talking about it. You asked me to come on here, so that's weird.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect sort of scenario in a way, but I want to talk about the beach ball because when you just mentioned the beach ball, it was like I had the option. So this context of the story was we were talking like we connect every week, you and me, in terms of our friendship and being mental and emotional and spiritual supports for each other. And sometimes those calls are let's hop into it right away, get to work, and it feels very like official, not official, but you know what I mean. It's like, oh fuck, I got stuff. Let's talk. And we're like, okay. And then we figure out who's going first.
Yeah.
And by the way, highly recommend you setting up alliance like this with people that you can trust and really be with. And you and I have worked so hard, and I'm so proud of our ability to go there with each other and all. This story will explain even more. It was like it took us to an even deeper level. And we were just, well, we weren't just talking. We were being curious about what was going on with me, maybe at the time. And you said, can I share an observation? And I was like, oh, that's very, 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 not very coachy, but I was like, oh, okay. Like we're in session, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, like that's also just a way to communicate, but I was immediately like, oh, okay. Like I thought we were just talking. And, and when you have a friend like this, when you have a friendship that we have, we're never just talking, like there's an intimacy and always paying attention and tuning into the best interest of each other. And I think part of me was just a bit like, not that I forgot, but I was just like, oh, she's not off the clock. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't just anyway, go ahead. What did you say to me?
Um,
You say to
Gosh, I'm
me?
trying to remember the real words. I actually I think it would be good to hear what you heard because I'm trying to remember the actual words I used.
Honestly, it doesn't have to be perfect. It was like the gist of, because who has had this experience? Because it's the equivalent of you've changed. It's the equivalent of I'm noticing something and you don't seem like yourself.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
that was the gist of it. I don't know the exact words, but you were like, oh, yeah, here they are. I was like, they just dropped right in. It was like, along the lines of like the Keri-Anne that I know, I don't see her right now. Like, where is she?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I remembered a time, I referred back to a
Yeah.
time we were, yeah. So I said, remember that? That's what so I'm not seeing that.
Mhm.
And that's all I said. And yeah. Yeah.
Holy moly. And it was, and I was, God, I mean, even to just, I don't know how that even feels to be listening to this, people listening, but it's almost like being put in under a spotlight, and on under a more critical lens, you could feel like under a microscope, and that could feel very triggering, and it could feel like, don't look at me, like I don't want you to look at me, like fuck off, you know what I mean, like that. And I was at the doorway of that. I was on the threshold of, I don't like that, I don't like her seeing me, I don't know what she's seeing. And this wave of confusion and bewilderment, and my eyes started to gloss over. I felt like an animal in the headlights. It was so disarming to have you stop me and just say that. Felt downright confronting to part of me. And I was upset, like that you had done that.
Mhm.
And I was so aware, and it all was coming, even just my neck is getting hot just talking about it. And that beach ball was, and here's the thing, the beach ball that was rising in me, I couldn't identify it. Like, I didn't know what it was, but it felt so revealing. Like, all of a sudden, my clothes were gone, and I was just, trying to cover up all the, and it almost felt like I didn't have time to hold on to anything, to cover up anything. You had seen something that I felt like I couldn't see,
Yeah.
and it woke up all of this. It was like the epicenter of what you describe as RSD. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that while we're in the middle of this, because
Mhm.
I had never really, I mean, I understood it, and I remember when I was very little and growing up, feeling that sense of that wave of hot, my face is hot just talking about it.
Yeah.
Just the wave of heat that would come over my body when I would feel a sense of rejection and the sensitivity and just that dysmorphia of like, I've made something bad happen. I'm wrong,
Yeah.
all of these things.
Yeah.
And you and I've been talking about it in my own life. I was thinking, it's been forever since I've felt like that. And I wonder if that's gone. I wonder if that's over until there's no accidents. Why it came up while you and I were talking.
Yeah.
And so can you share a little bit about RSD while we're just in this scene?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So RSD is not, it's not an official diagnosis. You can't go somewhere and get someone to tell you you have RSD. But RSD is, it stands for rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And what that is this overwhelming, intense reaction feeling to any sense of rejection or criticism or that you've done something wrong, even if it's perceived, even if it isn't real, you still can have the same intense, like you said, that hot feeling. I get the same thing. It's like this wave of heat. It's almost, for me, it's almost terror like. And as you were speaking, of course, you're sharing this story. I'm experiencing a little bit of RSD because I'm so worried that I caused this in my own friends. So it's like, how do you know two people have RSD without telling me you have two people have RSD? It's like we're
We're going to
both
get
in
into
this.
that because that was a part of my experience also,
But
right?
yeah, it
So,
can be.
yeah.
It's even
Mhm.
perceived. It doesn't even have
Yeah.
to be a real thing. So it is a
Well,
thing. It often comes with
yeah.
ADHD. So that's what that is. Yeah.
And it was like everything went into slow motion, and which was no coincidence because I have a feeling we were meant to talk about it and help almost break down the anatomy of like what happens. And you said it's like this wave of, what did you say? Wave of like shame.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just this, it was like this eruption of wrongness. Not in the fact that she saw something wrong, potentially wrong in me. That wasn't it. It was the, why do I all of a sudden feel so wrong? Like, why couldn't I just pull this conversation off? Why couldn't I just be wherever the hell I was? You know what I mean? Like, why couldn't I have just jogged that off? That was the piece. You caught me at the doorway. You said, hang on, there's something in your pockets, and I was like, what? There's nothing in my pockets. And and it lasted for like the membrane on that defense was very thin because I was like, and you saw immediately my face, you saw my eyes, and you went, what? Oh no. And so this is where I was like, oh crap, I'm having an RSD explosion in front of one of my closest friends who also has RSD. So I was very aware of this and that she's caused. So a big piece of RSD for me is like that showed up in my growing up was never wanting to rock the boat, always wanting, like trying to smooth the ocean out, and really when you try to do that, you just stir it up all the more. Like it's just not possible. And I was just so aware of yeah, growing up, it was that sense of keep the peace, make sure no one is upset. Even the slightest sigh, an eye roll, a shift of body language or posture, I would just be like, what is it? Like, I even find it in my marriage. I'm like, what is that? But now I'm angry. So now I've skipped over the whole, I don't want to make anyone upset. And I'm like, what the hell is that? Sort your shit out. Like, you know what I mean? I get a little more, I'm a little more aggressive. Because there's a part of me that's like, I'm not going back there. I am not
Mhm.
going back there. So now I'm going to be a little, like, no, you didn't. And that isn't right either, but I do notice it. And that's something for me to navigate. But when you caught me in the doorway, you were like, oh, hang on, you don't just get to walk through this doorway and run off what I just said. But at the same time, I think party was like, oh, maybe we should, because I don't think I can handle the fact that I've just cornered my best friend, made her feel a sense of awkwardness, to say the least, or humiliation, or like like just seen or something. Like, you just
Mhm.
hated
Yeah.
watching me where I was, and I hated where I was, because my eyes. And then as soon as, I was like, oh God, if I tried to run this off, I mean, when I say run this off, it's like act as though it's not happening. Like, no, no, and the octave goes way up.
What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about.
Why my voice is so squeaky, and then, because I don't think you would have heard me, based on the octave I would have had to go to try and bring it back down. The horse had already left the barn, it was already in motion. And I literally, it reminded me of when I was in elementary school and I was going to throw up in class, and I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want to make a mess. And so I ran out of my little grade 1 class, ran into the bathroom where all the grade 5 girls were, and they were all cool. And I just tore past them, and I literally sat in a corner. Not even couldn't even make it to a cubicle. And I pulled my knees up to my chest, and I just vomited, all
Mm.
like a fountain. Like, it was one of the most humiliating origin stories. Like, it's one of the earliest memories I have. And them just looking at me being like, oh God, like they're just like, what just happened? And they ran off and got help. But when someone came in, I couldn't move. They were like, give us your hand, like, let's get you out of that. And I just wouldn't have moved to save my life. I probably would have stayed there the rest of my life if someone hadn't encouraged me to get out. Like, that's kind of what it reminded me of. And I was just sitting there kind of vomiting in front of you, and I started crying. And then I started talking to you about how it felt, because I said, we need, I just hang on. Like, I was like, hang on. And you knew exactly what you were like. We're going on this ride together. And I almost had one hand in, like, please be okay, because I know you're triggered too.
Mhm.
Out of one side of my mouth, I was wanting to hold your hand to say, it's going to be okay. Like, look at me in the eye, and like, we're going to get through this. Because often, I don't know about you, but some friendships haven't survived this place where you've hurt someone inadvertently. Like you said, whether it's true or not, here it is. And some
Mhm.
friendships haven't, in my past, haven't survived that raw experience of, I did something to you, it humiliated or upset or hurt you, and the other person has not wanted or been able to stay in the room with me. They felt so uncomfortable, immediately resentful, defensive. I didn't mean that. And da, 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 and then it doubles down, and then I'm doubly alone or triply alone.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth it at all. It's the end of a relationship, and there's never eye contact after that, or there's, something like that. And so energetically, I was like, please, like, I think, are we going to do this? And I really felt like you and I we're doing this. Like, we're gonna go there, because yeah, you were there at the RSD because you had done something. You had stirred the apple cart. You had made a mess,
Mhm.
essentially, unintentionally. You
Mhm.
could have put any disclaimer around it when you were like, I'm not attached to this. I just want to say this thing. And it felt very divinely delivered in a way, because it was so pointed or poignant. It put me in such a potent place. It couldn't have been an accident. It wasn't just, oh, I was just thinking that. No, like, I know better. And so I was told to sit my ass down in those feelings and articulate in front of you, who has RSD, what y'all did to me. And it was like so scary for me, because I was like, I'm a loser. She's never gonna, I'm gonna tell her how I feel. But I was committed to how I felt. So I was telling you, like, I said, I just feel so humiliated. And
Mhm.
then I just started saying things like, like, don't look at me. Don't look at me. Like, I was having a full, I felt like I was in a child's body. and I couldn't look at you. And I was just, the tears were just falling out of me. And I had never felt so seen, pissing my pants, throwing up all over myself, with no clothes on, awkward naked, opening up a pickle jar, crouched in my living room. Like, it was just every single element of being revealed, not just to you, but to myself. And I just remember being like, don't look at me. And then I said, it's like you won't like me anymore. Like she won't like me anymore. Like the words coming out of me were like from an elementary school age.
Mhm.
And I just gave myself permission to excavate them and just say, I hope. And behind it, silently, I was like, I hope we can still be friends on the other side of this. I hope that you understand that that's what I'm doing, that I'm not trying to throw logs on the fire to make you feel bad, which is often the disconnect that happens in these moments in relationships. People think you're just saying that to me. I already feel bad. I didn't mean to. But there's a process, that if you see it through to completion, much like riding a wave to shore, we'll both end up on that sand together.
Mhm.
And thank God you understood the assignment, because I certainly in a way didn't understand it in it. I just felt compelled and led or guided to and dared to say the things and to express it. And with each wave, there was just a whole other packet of emotion that some of it I couldn't even articulate. It felt like years ancient uncried tears, and you you were the recipient.
Mhm.
um and I felt like it was such a test for me and for you and for our relationship. It was weird. It was super uncomfortable. Doesn't even cover it. This is the end. Like that's how it
Yeah.
felt for me. Not because I wanted it to be the end. I was making my ego, or that fear was making an assumption that, well, you're never going to look at me the same after this. Like once you see the insides of me like this, well, there is no unseeing it.
Yeah.
And this is me. And so that's what happened. And I unpacked and cried and shook, and it was like a traumatic release also too. Like it was releasing trauma. My whole nervous system was on. And what's crazy is that it was from such a simple and benign phrase in a way. But I think many of us have a relationship with that moment where somebody says, hey, like, what's going on? You're not the same. Or they just that essence of being seen, and me not being mirrored maybe a lot recently, and it feeling unfamiliar, or I'm not used to that. And it coming from love, which was something was whispering in my ear the whole time. This is an opportunity. And I was like, I don't want to miss the bus. So I didn't.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
fully jumped in front of the bus. So the weirder thing is that after, no, that wasn't after that call, but after a recent call that you and I had where you helped me clear some more stuff, my lungs got very, very sensitive, and grief is held in the lungs. And so that is partly to explain the cough that I've got. So that was my side of it. And on the other side, when I think we were both at the shore, we started talking about what had just happened. And I was then immediate once I felt like I had, it felt very selfish. I had to choose, do I hold Michelle's hand more, or do I allow this to occur and then explain? So I was told to commit to myself and trust and have faith that we were going to make it. It sounds so dramatic, but it was. But these moments there's something more going on. That's where I come from. So when you hear Michelle and I talk, I mean, I know you share this angle as well as I do, but this is always my first place of like, there's something else going on that maybe you're not meant to know articulately quite yet. But if
Mm.
there's emotion or energy moving, it's yours to move.
Yeah.
And so I committed to me moving it. And then once I started feeling the sand under my feet, and I went to you immediately, and I was like, okay, so just so you know, that was me. Just it was not about you. And so, what was your experience of that, or what would you
Um,
add to that? Because that is
yeah,
what I'm looking.
I think, that is this conversation that you're talking about is really an example of my growth, and it is a bit of it's an anatomy of something for me. It was anyway, because even just saying the thing was difficult, was scary, was I knew there's a level of there's a part of me that knew that it was a big thing, but there was also a part of me that I didn't have a choice. So there was something more going on there. There was like, no, this needs to be said somewhere
Because
along
you
the line.
said right away, you said you were almost like, so here's another thing I want listeners to be aware of. Sometimes you, me, Michelle, are inspired, led, urged to say something.
Yeah,
And we will just say it. And we will say it in the nature in which it was presented in our head and our instincts. It'll bubble up to the surface. Hey, bro, actually, I'm just going to say it like this. We're not attached to it. There's no heat behind it or spice. And yet it is apparently, from the recipient's perspective, hot fire,
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, and there are moments where it's like, oh my God, I had no idea. And there's that horror. And 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 so you're breaking down that moment of you. I'm just going to say this thing. It's got really nothing to it. So it should be all right. Like I can almost see you talking to yourself. It should be okay. It's no big deal. I'm just going to say this thing. And then you're like, oh, and then the horse left that barn. And then
Yeah.
you were a passenger to like what that was meant to be in terms of like a catalyst for me and for us.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in my mind, I tossed around how can I couch this in a way that it is, because I think I knew that it was going to be big for you. Although someone on the outside listening probably was a pretty benign. It wasn't an actually. It was a pretty benign statement,
It really
but
was. Like, even just
yeah,
talking, I'm like, why are we even talking about this? But it was a thing. And so
yeah,
I don't know. But
yeah.
it was like I shit my pants and we had to go, we were like, there
And
we
then
were.
this, yeah, and then the second I saw your reaction, I was then the RSD kicked in, that hot wave. So what happened as she was moving through her stuff was I was in two places. I was like, I want to hold space for my friend, and I want her to know that I love her. I don't give a rat's ass what, excuse me, I hope we can swear in there.
I already said
I
the F
don't
word.
care. I don't care what I'm seeing. I don't care about the naked. I don't. So I wanted you to know that. So I wanted to hold space, and I was massively invested in doing that. In the same breath, I was navigating, oh my God, I've hurt her. I have done something terribly wrong, and the washing over. So I had to put into practice what I teach my clients and what I talk to my clients about, which was massive self-compassion, massive just being aware of what was happening. So really taking myself out of the emotion for a minute and going, okay, I'm experiencing this. It's
Mhm.
okay. And so holding so many things in the space and going, I don't think I worried that we wouldn't be friends.
Mhm.
There was a couple of moments I was like, oh no, is this irreparable? Like, have I crossed a line? So I did have a couple of moments, but there was a piece of me that always kind of knew, I think we'll be all right. But it was an exercise in being self-aware and self-compassionate, and really embracing that throughout because it was, I mean, that was a long conversation, because you worked through so much through that conversation, and then when you had the sand under your feet, then we unpacked, holy shit, what just happened here?
Yeah.
Like, what just happened, and how are we okay? um so yeah.
Humbling, like, so it's interesting the places we were at because I was embodying what I teach, which is trust the
Mm.
emotion, even when you hate it and you want to unzip from your body and become a color again. And like let it carry you to shore, even if it feels like it's kind of ripping your skin off on the way. Like, it sounds so dramatic, but I mean, so at the center of really big expressions in the last month, losing a close friend and client, well, client turned very close friend, um, and just grief, opening up all the other griefs and being invited back into the center of these, like the hardest emotions we're asked to navigate.
Mhm.
But now navigating them, like that call that we did built. So my school of thought, or my philosophy, is that your willingness to express and feel your feelings has a direct relationship to resiliency, your strength, your fortitude, confidence, making decisions, being able to navigate your life, feeling more connected to yourself. Because it's often the emotional and energetic clutter that gets in the way, that almost like muddies or clouds the lens in which we're looking through. And I was sitting there with a pair of dirty glasses with you, and you were like, oh, there's something there. Like, I can see it. You might not be able to see because they're so close to your eyes. And that exchange, what we just described about that humiliation, if she sees something I don't, take the glasses off, and I realize, oh my God, I've been looking through these glasses and then I've been called out and I didn't even know. And so there was
Mm.
all this stuff going on. I had a huge emotional reaction and I trusted it to the end. And as a result, we were able to, but through humility, to me, it's a process of, and not humiliation, but the humility and humiliation, they run real close to one another, because humiliation is just, I don't know if I can decipher the difference, but well, humiliation is based in shame. It's
Mhm.
wrongness. It's I've done something wrong and everyone sees it and I'm beyond embarrassed. It's like embarrassment on steroids is
Yeah.
humiliation. Humility is understanding and honoring our openings and weaknesses and rawness and realness and our humanity. Like, just knowing that, of course, it's there. Like, that is actually what connects us. But the fact that humiliation was the way in, that's just the way it is, or the way it was in that moment. But so are other emotions like
Mhm.
shame or blame or whatever. And so, yeah, when we found ourselves on the other side, I felt the fact that you wanted to still talk to me. Like, you still, and you were just all love. And that is, when you're working with somebody, you need somebody that can stay in the room even when your legs are shaking, like terrible wall sits with a gym, the gym. I hate those things because I can't sit in them for very long. But when I'm with somebody, I can sit forever in that stuff and not be phased at all. But even when your legs shake, it's like, that's okay. You're not supposed to be perfect. You get to be human, but to have someone stay through the whole thing and love me on the other side
Mm.
is a gift that you and I hadn't experienced together. And I don't know if many people honestly get that that full experience from beginning to end. We often will leave a room, we'll go to the bathroom, we'll try and get our shit together, and then, maybe we'll sleep on it or we'll call each other later. No, it was like from beginning to end, we're not leaving the room. Lock the doors. Let's see what's on the other side of this. And we moved through a total wave of like an RSD experience. But to talk about the humiliation and the anatomy of it, it was fascinating to me because I think up until that call, I was like, oh, I think I'm okay with that. So like, I think that was 10 years ago, I could identify with that. And I was almost innocently arrogant. Like, I think I'm over it. And I think that's the thing. It's not about getting over it. It's about realizing that there are threads in our makeup, in our tapestry. And that was one that was just coming back to be like, and this is what it's like now. And as a result of this conversation, it is forever changed. It is
Mm.
forever transformed. You all just transmuted a bunch of stuff, not just for me, for you, for us. Those three things were all being transformed as a result of our willingness to me go there, you stay in the room, and us hold each other's hands while we
Yeah.
essentially both shut ourselves
Yeah.
and made eye contact while we did it.
Yeah. And I think you're right, when you said, I don't know that a lot of people have that. Which makes me sad and grateful, sad and grateful that I have this with you, and but sad that not everybody may have that. But then what came up in my brain when you said that was, so how can we give it to ourselves?
Give
How
what to ourselves?
that compassion, that unconditional compassion and love, when you're in the emotional storm, when you're in that, how can you give that to yourself?
So after Colleen died, I facilitated a phone call for her with women that loved her. And I was fine. I sound like Ross from Friends. I'm fine. Really, I'm fine. I was fine though. I couldn't access sadness in that moment because the reverence that was in the room with women loving on each other, surrounding this woman we love and having these final exchanges, knowing they were final. I've never been there before. And I want to say a part of me had no idea what I was doing, and another part knew exactly what I was doing. And I was very aware that I didn't feel sad, and I love death for that, because when you're nose to nose with it, in some moments, it's like when you understand something about it that's beyond the surface story of an ending, or that they're gone forever, when you realize that you're on the precipice with them for this next adventure, this next place that they're going. I don't know. I couldn't access sad. And the call ended and she died the next day. And I just sat in that awareness that she was gone. And I was almost looking for it, like, well, where's the emotion? Like, where is it? And it wasn't presenting itself right away. And so I thought that was very peculiar. But in the days and weeks to follow, it just showed up. The grief just, and what you were saying about, like, how can we be like that for ourselves? When the first wave of grief hit, and my immediate vibe was so primal. The grief was so big. It was so primal. The only visual I could access was, I felt like a fox or a rabbit or some small woodland creature that went to go find the trunk of a tree to burrow into in my little burrow and just die. Like, I didn't want anyone to see me. I didn't want to talk or breathe the same air as other people. I felt like a wounded animal that just wanted to go and curl up for it to pass, to whimper in private, to just suffer in solitude. Not because I'm a martyr, not because of any of that. It was primal grief. I felt like an animal. And so I didn't know how to language any of that to my husband or my kids. And so I felt like a fish out of water. I felt like I was in depths that I just couldn't. It felt very new and foreign. I felt like a newborn in it all, which made me feel like a total fraud based on what I'm here and how I'm here to help people. And humbling, right? Humbling. And that's okay. So I'm like, fine, whatever. I don't want this lesson. I don't like this. And was literally in bed, and my husband was just like, how can I help her? So I had someone, right? Like, so I had someone, but they're like, how can we do this for ourselves? And I'm hearing that and I'm going, Jesus, like, when I think about that moment, I couldn't have helped myself. Helping myself was going and curling up and just being in it. And then having him there, which is like, it's so nice to have somebody there. Like, we all want somebody that's going to move us through this, this awful feeling. We want someone there, and they better know the right thing to say. Like, they better have the right thing to say. I mean, that's so loaded. And my poor husband was like, God love him though. He's hurt. He must have, he hears me through the walls, I guess, but he's, duh, he hears me with the kids and he hears me with him. Who am I kidding? But he was like, what's going on? I said, and I felt like I was a kid again. I don't want this. I don't like this. I can't even articulate. What is wrong with me? What is wrong? Why am I so sad? It wasn't even I couldn't even finish the sentence. Like, part of me was trying, it wasn't even like I knew her my whole life. It wasn't even like I was there. It wasn't even like I had walked with her every day. I've been traveling, things like that. And all these trying to rationalize things. Like, it was just trying to be anywhere other than where I was being asked to be. And so he's trying to hold space, and she's very shaky on his legs because he's notorious for just giving himself a hard time for saying the wrong thing. And then I have to like manage him, and then I just can lose. Like, I love us, and I just feel for both of us. Like, I was feeling for you and me in that moment. It's like, oh, I just don't. This is why my instinct was to go be alone, because maybe nobody knows how to hold space for this, not even you. And so we're just going to go die, which sounds so dramatic, but in a way, something's dying, something, feelings, emotions are leaving, whatever it is. But he was like, no, I'm going to stay here. But he, there were tears out of me, like the waves of grief that he heard afterwards. And I was so grateful. He said, I heard miscarriage tears. I heard dad dying tears. I heard grandma, like back in 2002 when she died, he was with me. He said, I heard those tears. I haven't heard that one for a while. And he was like, I haven't heard that one for a while. Like, it was just like something about Colleen going was excavating all this. And he was witnessing it. And I was on the edge of the bed. And he said he was holding on to the waistband of my pants. Like, this is how embodied it was. I wanted to be, and he was like, I'm trying not to be hurt or feel hurt that you don't want me to be with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it's not that I don't want you to be with me. I don't want to be with me. If I had a zipper right here and I could have, I would have. Mm-hmm. I would have unzipped and been as far away from this prison of a human body that felt so contorted and in pain. And there wasn't enough space in me to feel the grief that I was being invited to feel. And I resented it, and I felt confronted and punished by God himself. I don't know, but it was just awful. So, I mean, that's so interesting, right? Because when you say, like, how can we be like good to ourselves? And so,
well, I think when I said that, what I was feeling was just because I think in that moment between you and I, mm-hmm. what I was doing was holding space and just giving you permission to be and do what you needed to be and do. And so my thought was, well, sometimes we don't have those people to do that for us. So how can we do that for ourselves? Yeah. How can we give ourselves space and permission to be and do what we need to be and do? And even in the intensity, even in the intense emotions, the perceived, whatever, it doesn't even matter if it's perceived. Listen, it's here. It's a wave. And for you, this grief, this overwhelming grief that you felt for your friend, but also other grieves, grieves, I don't even know if that's a word, but you know what I mean? Like other things, it was there. And so holding space for yourself and giving yourself that permission to go into the hole and maybe not die, but let that move, give yourself the compassion to let it move and let it be what it is. And I think so many people are afraid of that. There's a fear of feeling, there's a fear of that, because what if I don't get out of it?
You got it. Like, that is the fear, because what if I'm I knew I was being changed. So, and I didn't know how I was being changed. And I think that is on a very deep soul level. I think we know that about emotionally expressing ourselves, that if I were to follow a simple process that I teach is just admit what you feel, admit what you see, admit what you think. And that can sound very benign at times and just very, oh, and like almost like pop, like a bubble pops, and there's a new awareness as a result of me admitting something I thought or felt or perceived. Just even saying it to clear the air. Just, oh, and then all of a sudden the bubble pops and there's like a newer, truer truth under it. And oh, that feels better. It's like, oh. And so to me, that's been a way of supporting myself and trusting the process.
Mm-hmm.
Just feels a whole lot easier when it's a little bubble popping. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what's
Like,
interesting about what you said though was that just naming it, just admitting it and naming it. And what that does is it actually puts a tiny bit of space between you and the emotion. Doesn't mean you're not having, it's you having the emotion. You are not the emotion. And so when you put a bit of space in between that, suddenly it's like, oh, I'm a human being having this emotion, and that's okay.
it's reprieve. It's like in
Yeah.
Ireland, they don't in the Irish language, they don't say I am sad. They say I have sad. I
Yeah.
have anger. The word
Exactly.
have is always, or they say anger is on me. Anger is with me, you know? And that is it's an important distinction. We are not our situations. You are not your circumstance. You are not your emotions. You're the vessel that's being asked to move emotions, energy that wants to move.
Yep.
And rumination is a term that I'm really loving right now, because that's what you're talking about when you're saying, when we don't allow ourselves to feel things through to fruition. So I'll meet someone and they'll talk, well, we'll talk about emotions, right? We'll say, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. And I think it's important to to work with somebody that understands, somatic experiencing, naming things, helping to untangle the nervous system in a way that's respectful of your experience, and to, yeah, that process of unraveling things with compassion and making sure that you are behind the wheel. Nobody's leading you through something. You're being coached, facilitated through it, and empowered to be aware of like
Mhm.
what's happening, to no longer feel afraid of being in your own body. And when you talk about hanging on and gripping, and because we're so worried, that what are we worried about? Like in your experience, what is that when you hang on? Or
I think for me, from my experience and my experience with clients and friends and a lot of people is that they'll never get out of it. If I allow this to wash over me, I'm going to be here forever. But what we know is that it is a process, a continuum. You will come out of it. And that's the beautiful work that you do as a coach, I believe, Keri-Anne, is that you facilitate someone going down into that place and you facilitate them coming out. You stay with them right to the end. And interestingly enough, that's what we talked about, what we did in the call. When we had that call, is I stayed with you right from the start all the way down, knowing that you will come out of it eventually. So giving ourselves, giving people that compassion, the staying in the room. I'm going to stay in the room for this. I let it be what it is. Let it move. Emotions are, what did you say? Movement, energy that needs to move.
Just wants to move. Like,
It just wants to move. And so
yeah.
the fear is it's not going to move. The fear is I'm just going to stay here forever. I'm just going to be this miserable forever. But that's
God,
not that's not what happens. We just know that. We learned that in coaching school. There's so many places that we've learned that no, that's not how energy works. Energy moves, right?
I think to answer your question earlier about like how can we help ourselves when we're alone, when we don't have somebody, I think it's really tricky because if you haven't embodied that, going in and witnessing the shedding, like embodying the expression of emotion and surviving that death, you know what I mean? Like, if you haven't had someone move you through that sense of fruition, sorry, there's trucks outside. If you haven't had someone move you through that to the point where you ride the wave and then you feel the sand on your feet,
Mm-hmm.
without that, you will never trust your body. You will never really trust your emotions. And because I'm thinking back to when things changed for me, and it was through coach training, through being coached, through hiring a coach that understood the expression of emotions and, the process of emoting, that I grew resilient because I understood that there was life on the other side. And that is what helps me go in now. When I
Mm-hmm.
feel it come up, even when I was on the edge of that bed and I wanted to be as far away from myself in that emotion, there was something that was daring me to just stay in the room. And that was something that my husband and I were meant to go through, because I don't think I'd ever let him hold that level of space for me before. Like,
Yeah.
and so I was teetering in and out of like, are him and I going to be okay? Is he going to take this as a moment of failure for him because he can't, or he doesn't know how, or ineptness, and, things like that can come up from his side, because I don't blame him, because I was, what connected us in the moment was because I was popping out and going like, I wouldn't want to be here either. Like, oh my God, just admitting like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think he was just being like, well, you do this all the time, and he was like really holding me to this standard of
Mm-hmm.
like, you should know. And I was trying to tell him that's not how it works. Like, that's not how that works. Like, I get to, and I'm invited into deeper depths. Like,
Yeah.
great. Like, I don't know, but
Thank
sorry.
you.
Like, as my partner, I'm sorry. Like, you as my partner, I'm sorry that now you're being asked to witness it. You're being asked to witness me being scared of
Mm-hmm.
my own emotions, or so vulnerable, and nothing being able to fix it. That's not the point. It's not about, there's nothing wrong with emotions. That's where we've always gotten the wrong end of the stick through societal and movies, whatever, however that started. But you and I do a lot of work on ourselves and with other people to help untangle those societal beliefs and limitations of like, who started that anyway? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
animals know how to shake this shit off. They flap their wings and they move on, and they have a sense of moving through things, and they shake, and we don't allow any process to feel the energy that moves through our body.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Yeah.
rob ourselves of this other experience that is downright spiritual, breakdown to breakthrough. Like, we don't see it as a breakthrough. I I hated December because I had 3 just huge volcanic moments that I've never experienced. That also made me feel very guilty because I lost my father in 2016, and I felt ashamed to say, I don't even think I felt like this with my dad. And
Mm-hmm.
is it okay that I say that? Whatever it was, it opened up, grief opens up other griefs. We don't get to choose sometimes what is being opened up, what caves and what bats fly out. And so we're essentially being dared to open and stay open and let what wants to fly out, fly out. And if something in the process wants to leave us with nuggets of wisdom or insight or awareness or intuitive like visions or like things were coming to me as I was allowing myself to feel. And that's another piece, so emotions are this intuitive super highway. And I just let go and see if something is meant to land, resonate, be insightful in the process, fine. I'll be open to it. I'm not going to look for it though. I'm not going to like force, you don't force that
Mm,
stuff
yeah.
because there's many things happening at the same time. There's like, I think 3 or 4 things happening. And the first things that come is that certain like garbage out, garbage in, garbage out. So there's garbage that just wants to leave, energetic clutter and shit. So make room, get out of the way, let ourselves feel stuff. So that stuff can go out.
Yeah.
And then the bonus is that we might have intuitive connections. We might hear or see things that are open up an awareness and click like a lock and a key. And also we're like, oh, I understand something. Like it's like, I didn't see that, until, and the only way I was able to see it was by emotionally shitting my pants, like, which is such a weird reward for something that feels like awful and hard to do. And then on the other side of that, the third or fourth thing is like a sense of relief, a sense of peace. Like there's something on the other side that it wants to give you or open you up to, which is maybe there's just more space. And what if instead of trying to fill that space with the clutter that was there before, to like, let's just stretch out, enjoy the space. What if that space is now space between you and a trigger for you to no longer get as triggered so fast you actually have a bit of a beat? Maybe that's what that space, we don't know, but like there's an instinct of like a feeling of emptiness that sometimes people feel. Even on the other side of feeling big emotions, it'll feel peaceful, but then it's like, oh, I feel like empty. And then it can go into a whole other thing. But that's, I mean, we've never had that where you've almost been unsettled by the emptiness or
Mhm.
space. It depends on what you want to call it, right? Like, but if a part of you perceives it as empty and alone, and it's basically saying it's like being on, what was that ride in Disneyland, the Captain to the Caribbean or whatever? Oh my God,
Oh,
I feel
Pirates of
like
the
an old
Caribbean.
lady. The
Yeah.
captains of the no, you didn't get it right, Grandma. Where you think you're going here, but then it's like, oh, we're going down again, and you go,
Mhm.
no. Like you're just like, I was just on the relief end of that first. Oh no, a third or a fourth. Well, we don't always get to know what we don't know if completion is really completion sometimes, but all that to say what I don't know, but there's a process, and it is very courageous
It is.
to
It's the embodiment of courage. I believe that it's an embodiment of courage to be willing to stay curious, to be open, and to stay in the room. And to stay in the room for yourself, for your friends, for the loved ones, just stay in the room and hold space and just go, because it's hard, when someone's going through grief, something like grief, um, people don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They don't know how do you, but again, I think it's just a lesson in compassion and just holding space,
was
holding.
there was there a moment, sorry, I don't mean to
Yeah, go
interrupt, I'm
ahead.
going to
Go
finish.
ahead. Yep.
Well, I'm just wondering, was there like a pivotal, can I say this word?
Pivotal.
Thank you. I love that I said, can I say this word? And you said it for me.
Yes.
Is there a pivotal moment
Yes.
where things shifted for you? Like where you went from feeling like a problem
Mm.
or wrong, or I don't know, into realizing or embodying, or a time.
Um, I think it's been a process rather than a one pivotal moment. Like I think it's been a process and a peeling back of layers. And that speaks to the unmasking piece, which maybe is another podcast we can do. But the unmasking piece has been really crucial and important for
Mhm.
me to give myself the permission to feel those things and really design agreements with the people that I love, like with my husband, and just say, listen, this is me. This is who I am. I'm an emotional person. I feel things on a very, very deep level. And I know that's uncomfortable for you. But how do we come together? And so he is evolving now. We have agreed, we've made agreements, like, I don't need you to fix me, I would say to him. And he says, what do you need? Do you need anything? Like, if he sees me in that moment. So it's beautiful when that happens, because I'm like, oh, so much weight is lifted off me. I don't have to take care of him. He understands where I'm at. So it's been a process of designing that and unmasking and peeling back those layers, and knowing that I will come out of it, because I do still have the intense highs, but that understanding and awareness of where it's coming from, number one, and number two, knowing that I will come out of it, and number three, knowing that I have people in my life who understand it and who love me. And it doesn't need to be a lot of people, even just my core little tribe is plenty. It's plenty. If more come, great. But in this moment, it's like I'm digging the people I got, and
You got us all on
it's
speed dial.
beautiful. Yeah, it's
It is.
beautiful. And it's the, I remember when we had a girls' weekend, and I kind of came out in the ADHD where, it's like, listen, this is where I'm at. And I'm really trying not to be the people pleaser. I'm trying, like, and that was so hard for me to do. But suddenly I have a new level of friendship with these women, and a new level of understanding, and a new level of intimacy with these women that I never, ever, ever have had with any friends before. So yeah, in answer to your question, I don't think it's one pivotal moment. I think it's been a process, and it's been, in all honesty, quite beautiful and heartbreaking and joyful, and it's the gamut. So I'm experiencing emotions left, right, and center.
What's been heartbreaking about it?
That it's taken this long. The grief of, wow, I could have had this with people before had I known all this. And it's sort of this, oh, I wish I would have known. I would, wishing something that I didn't
Like you
have.
might not have lost out on that as an opportunity, or you could have had.
Yeah.
Wow.
And also the grief of, being a massive people pleaser. Like, there are no words for how much of a people pleaser I was. How much I gave up, and how much I compromised, and how much I put myself last, and put myself, I wasn't even seated at the table in any way, shape, or form. I wasn't even there. I didn't allow myself to have a place at the table ever. So that's sad to me. It's like I feel for that little girl that's like, oh no, I don't matter. You go ahead.
That seamless assumption that never gets questioned because you've never said it out loud. It's just autopilot. It's like woven into the fiber of our being, and we're making grown-up decisions about where we belong and how we be in the world, and we haven't let anyone else in on it. And when you talk about unmasking, it's like you're describing the intimate process of realizing, like seeing something in yourself, seeing something that is you and something that isn't, and then being given the opportunity to make a different choice about how you be in the world,
how you show up in the world. And there's a lot of grief that comes with that, because again, I think we're going into a whole different podcast, but I think that the grief for me that comes with that is the relationships that I had based on the people pleasing based on the person that I was. And so now I'm showing up in a different, I'm showing up as a different person essentially to these people. And they're like, what the hell are you doing? You're changing the game here and I don't like it. And it's the strength to go, no, this is me. This is who I am. And, and so some relationships have suffered. Some have changed.
Yeah.
Some are better and some are worse and some are lost. And it's heartbreaking. Yeah. But in the same breath, I know who my people are. So
without a doubt now, you know
yeah,
what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and that the solidity in which I say it, it's like, that's how it feels.
yeah.
And I'm just going to blurt what I'm getting, which is like, and do you think, it's like that element of regret, looking back in the grief soup, that we're sort of looking back at the big picture and feeling for the version of you that needed to please. But at the same time, would the reward be as sweet? Would any of it be as poignant or as potent or as like, I just feel like it's nutrient rich. Like what you are consuming right now is pure nutrients, no filler.
Yeah.
And I guess I want to make sure we're saying that I don't think that is just, it's very convenient and easy for parts of us now to be like, well, it would have been nice if I'd had that 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Totally.
By the way, who loves that person in a room? Like when something awesome has happened, when there's been a revelation in a room full of people, and there's always that one person that's like, it's just like, really, Aunt Marge? Like, really? Was that helpful?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, and so to acknowledge that she's got a point, and
The sweet is never as sweet without the sour. Let's just throw that on the table. And you're absolutely right. I wouldn't change it for the world.
yeah,
I
like, not to
wouldn't.
convince you out of not feeling that way, but because that is also a part of
The human
the fruition,
experience.
the evolution. It's part of it. You can't, if you're saying yes to it all, you're saying yes to it all. And letting things be maybe a little undone for a while, a little raw for a while, a little unhealed for a while, like a little exposed to the air for a while, because that's respectful of your experience and your endurance and the parts that were in battle, that were in struggle because they weren't known to you or others. So even just saying the fact that they weren't even really known to you because you never even gave them air, well, it wasn't even possible for that to
Okay, but
occur.
doesn't that bring us back full circle to emotions?
Yes.
Giving
They have
them
not left the room. They have not left the room, because what was given to you while you were talking is like, there's many things happening at once that is creating strength, that is creating fortitude, that is creating resiliency. And it all begins with your willingness to express yourself truthfully. That doesn't mean it's the truth. Don't get it mixed up, because I have said truths that were not true at all, but in the moment they were true. I hate so-and-so, or I hate you. Well, I didn't really mean it, but it certainly was true,
Yeah.
But my willingness to say it dissolves me into shame, because how could I ever say that to or about, and then there's a shame layer, and then I release that. Oh my God, I'm the worst. And then as a result of me releasing that and moving that out, that sludge out of my body, then I get to a tender, vulnerable, real place of, I'm just a little girl that wants to be loved and to love. And it ends up getting so simplified and innocent. But the journey there is it's like we're army crawling. It's just like so I guess for us to talk about it, I'm hoping it's normalizing, like, even for people that get paid to help people move through this stuff, like, we're very aware of what it's like to be in the, I don't want to be here. Like, I want to be anywhere but here. And that's why It's important to have women, people you can trust and that can hold that space and can hold you with a gaze in love. And that is probably more disarming and dismantling than anything else. I would have really appreciated a little edge judgment on that day when we were having our moment. That would have made me feel a whole lot better because then I could be mad at you and I'd be like, you did, but no, you were as open and as real and as present. And that is also a result of your work and willingness of feeling your own shit.
Mhm.
Clearing out your own vessel means you got more room to hold for people like me in those moments. And it is a strength. And so there's a symbiote. Show me the figure eight. So it's like there's a symbiotic thing that is happening as a result of you allowing yourself to clear that pipeline. You get in flow. It ain't pretty. Expect it to be messy, like all of the bodily functions. So when you can expect that and have compassion for that in the process, the change that happens for you inside and out. Inside, I'm in through what you've shared, confidence. What is confidence? To me, it is knowing what's in here, knowing what I see, knowing even when I say, here's what I know, I also don't put so much responsibility on it to be a forever truth. Like, here's what I know right now. And that confidence builds for me being able to just continue to admit where I'm at right now. And as a result, there's something catalytic that happens inside of me that makes me feel like I can know, love, and trust myself.
Mm.
But then it's an invitation for those around us to either become more intimate with us, into me see, into you see, and not everybody wants in on that. And that's the heartbreak for me. And I didn't know I was asking myself that question, but to me, that has been the biggest heartbreaking thing.